everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Knee Slappin' K-Pop podcast. I am Kayla, and today I am here with Maria.
Hello.
And Sammi.
Hi.
And so today we're going to do a very different episode than what we normally cover on this podcast. But all three of us are very big true crime enthusiasts. We love true crime documentaries and just like consuming a lot of true crime content, as a lot of women do.
We're zillennial women.
Yep.
We absolutely
as women our age
true
do.
Crime.
Are we like zillennial though? Because we're like on the cusp.
We're zillennial women. That's
we're
what
literally right in the middle.
I think it's millennial.
Yeah. We're zillennial women.
We're cuspers.
We love true crime.
We cuspin over here.
We adore true crime, as many our age do. And
Yeah,
so we have been trying to figure out a way to get true crime onto this podcast for a really long time.
It's very
and it's just like, as you would imagine, trying to make a true crime episode on a K-pop podcast, really not very easy.
K-pop and K-pop adjacent podcast, very difficult.
Yeah. However, so there have been semi-recently, 2 documentaries on Netflix that cover Korean true crime. And so we were like, why don't we just talk about both of those? So we are going to talk about today 2 different South Korean true crime documentaries. They are both on Netflix. Very accessible. They also have English stubs in case you don't want to sit there and
highly do not recommend.
Just watch them on subtitles.
Highly
guys.
don't recommend that.
Do it on subtitles.
I highly don't recommend that. But if you want to, it's there.
If you decide to make that choice, make that choice.
Yeah,
sure. But the first one is Cyber Hell Exposing an Internet Horror, which is about the South Korea's Nth Room case, which that is very recent. That happened in like 2019.
This was heavily documented too. Like this was right off the heels of Burning Mokta, and to what we know, it didn't involve celebrities, but still was probably arguably worse than Burning Mokta.
Much
Burning
worse.
Mokta was pretty bad.
It is
active, like
it's significantly worse. Burning Sun.
Like not saying Burning Sun.
No, Burning Sun is pretty bad. Really bad.
But like
this is another level.
This
of
is
like
another
fucked.
level.
Yeah. The second one is the Raincoat Killer. That is
Chasing a Predator
in Korea. Yep. And so that is a 3-episode documentary on Yoo Young Chul, the Raincoat Killer. Yep. So Cyber Hell is just a a movie, like a 2-hour movie. So
they're both about the same amount of time because they're both they both take about 2 hours to watch in total.
Yeah, so there isn't really a different time between them. Just one decided to split up into a mini series, and the other one was all like, let's just do it all one go.
And now is when we begin our 18 disclaimers.
Yes.
Because one, we are not true crime podcasters.
We're not going to become a true crime podcast ever outside of this one episode that we're doing on true crime.
Unless they release more Korean true crime videos onto Netflix.
Even then, that depends on
Yes.
There is one at the end we are going to talk about that we want immensely. That I need.
Oh my god, I need it.
But these are us specifically talking about reviews of the 2 documentaries where we are going to obviously talk about the crimes. 1, apologies in advance for any sort of mispronunciation. None of us speak Korean, for one. 2, we're not going to get into specifics about the crimes that are not necessary. Watch the documentaries yourself. Look this up, please.
Yeah, our knowledge on these 2 cases are what has been shown in the documentary.
I'd say I'm a little bit more familiar with the Nth Room, but like that's because it was recent.
I have done a bit more information. Like I've looked up, and honestly, before I watched these 2 documentaries, I'd already like seen a couple of things of people talking about both Nth Room and the Raincoat Killer, because that's a name for a killer. That's a name.
But our goal here is not to give you like a chronological breakdown of the crime like a typical true crime podcast. This is like specifically we watched these 2 documentaries and we're going to talk about
the documentaries. Yeah. We're going to talk about how we felt about how the documentaries covered the cases. It's mainly about that, not so much the actual crimes. We're going to possibly give you our thoughts on certain things about the actual crimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, we do not mean any harm or disrespect to the actual people that are involved with any of this. We don't know. We're not going to dig too far into that. Especially with the Nth Room.
The Nth Room is really just
especially
hard.
With the
It's
Nth
just
Room,
a hard thing to talk about generally.
The Nth Room is basically horrifying. To put it bluntly.
I mean, let's be honest here. Both of these are horrifying things to happen to people. But, so we do not mean any form of disrespect to anybody. nor are we trying to diminish any of this to just entertainment, because obviously true crime has the added thing of, are you gaining entertainment through the horror of others?
Yeah.
That is not something we're going to get into at this very moment.
Nor are we going to try to
I'm not going to try to explain why true crime is... Why the three of us have managed to, we didn't come together through true crime.
No, we didn't.
Dear God, has it bonded us together further?
Yeah. We do consume a lot of true crime content.
Exactly.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's that. And so we're going to start with the Nth Room.
The Nth Room. Ugh.
Internet horror.
Yep. So just a couple sentence breakdown of what the Nth Room is and what that entire, scandal is about is essentially they were a handful of people in the documentary. It goes over two specifically named Gadgan and Baksa, who ran these online chat rooms with hundreds of thousands of other people in them, where he was essentially blackmailing a lot of young women and often very young children as well into posting essentially pornography against their will in these chats to these hundreds of thousands of other people who are also
and
there.
They are these private chats on Telegram, which, if you have no idea, very big to use that for. Also very big in the American alt-right. It's the same Telegram.
Yeah.
The same Telegram that's used by the American. Who would have thought?
But I will say how they did get these people though by basically posting links and getting essentially a link with getting them attention to be oh, your information's been linked or something like that, to try to click on to people for that.
It's essentially just a scam because it's used twofold. It was used both to do that and also as a scam for, they talk about it a little bit in the documentary, as a scam for old people to take all their money.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's a double fold where they would get extremely blackmail and sexually explicit images from women and also old people's money.
Yes.
Which is horrifying.
Yeah.
Basically the lesson of that whole Nth Room case should be just don't click suspicious links. If it's someone you don't know or if it's someone you do know and it doesn't look like a normal format with a link that they sent to you, don't click a suspicious link.
But also, let's not victim blame in any capacity.
No, I'm not victim blaming, but I'm just saying, if there is a big takeaway from that, whatever you do, don't click on suspicious links, is the big thing that I think that was hammered into that situation. And I'm not surprised that, because I've even accidentally almost did that to myself a couple of times when I'm but I caught myself and
I work in a hospital. That's how people's medical records get held hostage. Look that up. That happens all the time. You can hold a hospital hostage by one email.
I can see why. I'm not victim blame at all. I can see why people would reasonably,
yes,
because
exactly.
especially if you're a kid, that's terrible that people would mess with people like that.
Exactly. It is. They make this look. There are ways that people make this look extremely, extremely real.
Yes,
it is the smallest. They look so real. People will get duped,
and that's terrifying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and it's happening everywhere. They even in the documentary they talk about how this happens all over the world to people all over the world and continues to happen. They've only been able to get essentially 2 of these chat rooms down because it was really only these 2 people, and while they were probably the 2 biggest ones in South Korea, they are not the only
they're
ones.
not the only ones.
They're all over the world. It happens. So that is essentially what Nth Room is. The documentary is mainly told as almost a chronological perspective of the journalists that actually had to essentially infiltrate.
Yeah.
We're going to go with infiltrate these rooms.
They did. They infiltrated them.
Yeah.
The thing I find most interesting is that this all started because one guy, one journalist, was like, there's no one in the office. I'll look into the story. It's probably nothing. And then it wasn't nothing.
Yeah, no.
It kind of blew up.
Famous last words is all I'm going to say there.
Famous last words.
God.
Because, you get one journalist, I believe it was, Kim Won. I wrote his name down because he was, the first person you meet. And, he gets one tip-off about, hey, there might be, child images on Telegram going around, and he's like, okay, sure, I'll probably find nothing. It's a Saturday. and then it balloons into this extensive network of blackmail and horror.
Basically.
And it's like, this really went through so many different journalists as well.
And even students.
One of the big players in this documentary
students.
are a group of journalism students who just happened to come across this and and saw it getting no media recognition, and were just like, well, this is terrible, and we want to do something to like make it more well known. And they ended up being one of the big players in that, with helping the police like get information on these groups and everything.
They still kept them anonymous though, because I think they're trying to still pursue an education and stuff like that.
They're not. Many of them possibly are not pursuing journalism in that way as a career path.
No.
They do want to still keep them anonymous, even within the documentary, which was good.
Yeah, that's good.
But overall, it just did seem like this wasn't. Because a lot of times, it was interesting to view it as this was a slow chipping away, as opposed to one big scandal that comes out all at once.
Yeah.
This is like, it takes months, it takes a lot of hard work, it takes a lot of people just essentially having to consume things that are
horrific,
god-awful. I can only imagine what half of these journalists that are like just receiving images like this to try to get to a deeper into the community are like watching.
And there's also a big factor to this is cryptocurrency as well. There's a whole
especially
with
I wasn't aware how big cryptocurrency was a part of this.
There's a lot of cryptocurrency involved in this too.
I assumed it was cryptocurrency because how else are you not tracing things? But it was just wild that it's just like one very specific type of cryptocurrency. I didn't write down what it was. Oh, it's a best coin. Which is what the like,
that's a title. That is a title for it. Gosh.
Best coin was used to sell these videos, which is okay.
All right, great, fantastic.
But the other thing with it is that I feel like it like ballooned out because you start with like because they didn't start with the Nth Rooms. The Nth Rooms became something that they found later.
No, because they found Boxa first.
They found Boxa first, and Boxa was bad.
He was like a tier down from God, who was like the main big guy in charge of the stuff.
Yeah, because the Boxa Rooms were essentially like, people were talking as if like, you think these are great? Just wait until, because like it's like you get into those and it's like a stepping stone to get into like invited to see worse shit.
Yeah.
Like,
and the ironic thing about Boxa is that he literally calls himself Doctor. Boxa is doctor in Korea. And his room was called Baksaban, which is doctor's room, literally.
Yep.
So, which is like really fucked up, especially if you know a lot of the images that were shown in these rooms. It's like,
it is.
God.
It is unclear
disgusting
to me because I know there were child images in the Nth Room. The Boxa Room, it was always more unclear to me on if there were actually any children in that, and if that is what made Nth Room that. Because Nth Room was just bigger. Nth Room had more people involved.
True.
But also there is for a fact child images in the Nth Room. The Boxa Room was, I think, slightly, like, still horrifying, still blackmail, still fully not consensual. But I'm not sure if there were I don't believe there were. There could have been, but I think that was one of the big things that made, like, Nth Room that much worse. And, like, God was, like, that much worse.
As for the documentary, I know with certain descriptions, like when they came to, like, talking about victim stories or something like that, they use a lot of animations, like
which
not horrific, but like it was
the cinematography and like animations of this documentary are like super well done.
Yeah, I thought they were good representations, and they weren't horrific, and they were like they got the point across.
They also did use some of the images, not the explicit ones, but it was so like well censored in a way where you could tell what was happening. They're the much more tame images, tame in as much as you can call them that.
Yeah,
but they were better. Like you got the point across without, and then with people talking about like the worst stuff happening, you can get the gist of it without needing to see horrific images yourself.
I agree. It was also interesting to learn how the police were like trying to catch him using the cell phone towers too. You hear about that a lot in or not really cell phone, more so Wi-Fi. I think it was Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it was a Wi-Fi.
How they pinged it off of
like
Wi-Fi,
IPs
which was
and
I thought was it was interesting and cool to learn how they caught him in that regard.
This is entirely a different type of, like, this is an entirely cyber-based crime.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to, like, police did have to do something a little bit different as opposed to the other one we can talk about, which is the Raincoat Killer, which is far more, like, traditional on-the-ground
The Raincoat Killer was also just, like, essentially the establishment of, like, Korea's, like, violent crime, like, murder detective force generally. Because that's really
there.
Yeah, it's, like, entirely
it's a little
new
different.
to them.
Yeah.
So that was... It was interesting. It was just interesting to just sort of see... Because you could tell even from a lot of the reporters and a lot of the journalists that were talking about it that they were like, I didn't even realize that it could get this bad. And I'm like, I get it. Because this was like the big scandal that sort of broke open all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was like very much
what was
dark
wild
web.
To me is
very
when the first article about this came out, which was one that was written in collaboration of those journalism students, like, and the police investigating it, it got like almost no attention immediately.
Which is
it
insane.
took several months after that for people to even start beginning to realize, like, yeah, this is really fucked up and we need to, like, figure it out. Like, it was wild to me that something that horrific got exposed and no one seemed to care for months afterwards.
I mean, the only thing I would question is what else was happening around that time, like, news-wise.
That's what I'm saying, is, like, it truly does depend on, like, what else, like, dropped or was happening that same day.
Yeah.
Because, like, depending on what's going on, it can, like, get buried, and then, you know, if it doesn't hit the same day, it's not gonna hit, like, 2 or 3 days later. Like,
yeah.
We also know that it was around the same time as Burning Sun, which was a, like, year-long affair. Like, it took years for that to settle. This also, when it then started getting traction, was another, like, months-long, like, thing that everybody was talking about. So it just depends on, like, what else was going on at the time. I know there was also a bunch of, like, depending on what it is, political things, all of that.
I was gonna say that might be when the South Korean president stuff was happening.
That's true.
That might be around the same time. So there was a lot of other things, like, not that, like, this should have been, like, it was weirdly not even swept under the rug. It was just that the public didn't get the attention of it.
Yeah.
Because there was, I guess, other things going on.
Yeah.
But it did eventually get its time.
And I know, like, over time, they've been just arresting and trying to, you know, detain anyone who was connected with any of these rooms. Like, I think over 200-something, 60-something suspects.
I wrote it down. There were, like...
I want to say. There was a lot.
There have been 3,700.
There we go.
I wrote down the statistic at the end. 3,757 people linked to the Nth Room have been arrested.
Okay. I don't know where I got 200,
245 have been in prison.
Okay.
So only 245 have actually
That's probably why.
They've arrested all of the other people just for who knows what the other circumstances are.
Yeah, because it could be one of those things where somehow they get these images or whatever out from the Nth Room, they give it to someone else, and then people are like, oh my god. And then they're like, you got this material out you got from here. Explain.
Yeah, you receive material, like, who's aware of, plus it depends on, like, what, I don't know how the deal system works, and, like, how you get, like, you know, deals in Korean prison systems. It could be a lot of other factors going on at the same time.
That's true.
But they did find both, Bosca and God, horrific people. Both of
they look like what you imagine like a Korean incel will look like, is the best way to describe them.
They kind of just look like average Korean people.
Kind of, but they also give me like
men.
They give me very much incel vibes too. So
fair enough.
Well, that's wild that so many people in these rooms, and it was like were like super young.
They were very young,
like in high school. Like some of them, it seemed like, which was like upsetting.
I heard, like, I thought they mentioned a 12-year-old too, and specifically
there was a 12-year-old at some point, I think, known in like, one of these. I can't remember which of the rooms he was in, but like there was, I think, a 12-year-old mentioned to be a part of it,
which is like just bad. God.
But also that kind of does track with how young men, especially, like, we've seen that now currently of how a lot of young men view women. Incel culture is very much a young man's game.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very young
It doesn't
incels.
help, too, that Korea in particular bans porn. which some could argue is a good thing, but in other cases, I think it has led to more cyber crimes like this happening, where they coerce women to doing that.
Yeah.
It does in a way, but it's not as if porn is that difficult to... It might be maybe for younger people who don't know, but it's not as if porn is, apparently from what I hear, difficult to obtain.
Assuming you have a VPN, I guess, is apparently what I've heard.
Yeah, you need a VPN. Like, it's apparently not very difficult to... It's like how gambling is illegal when it's, like, not that hard.
True. But I wouldn't be surprised if that, in a way, is a factor. Plus, I think I think Korea also in general doesn't... There's a lot of factors to it, I think.
Also wild to me how openly both of these people were just talking to the police and the journalism online throughout this entire thing.
Oh yes,
where they were just like so confident in not getting caught that they're just like, I'm gonna go and taunt the police right now.
And the ego of these people is just
dox these journalists as if they can't. Like that doesn't make it that much.
Oh, they dox them. They dox one of the police people. I'm pretty sure they did that.
They put his kids. They found his kids' faces and put his kids in the room.
Yeah.
Like, just, like, not like, not any photo, like, just
and
family pictures of him and his children on the room.
And that's terrifying.
Because they were that was just, like, a taunting method.
Yeah.
And that's, like, messed up.
They ended up finding, God, because his, like, dad owned, like, a junkyard or something.
Yes, which is how he was able to switch all these phones.
Like, phones, all these old phones in there that he would just, like, log onto and, like, put his stuff on, like, temporarily and then, like, throw it out again in the junkyard.
Yeah.
And then the police got their hands on one of those phones and were essentially able to confirm, like, that was enough evidence that he would download all of the same apps throughout all of the phones he used.
Yeah.
And that's how they eventually ended up getting him.
But it's also why he was able to avoid getting caught for a long time, because he kept using different phones.
Yeah.
And just different Wi-Fis. And also he disappeared for a year, apparently. I remember that. For whatever reason, he disappeared for a year.
I know a big part of it was, like, they did not know what country he was in. Because he would claim he was in Malaysia or in China. Or, like... So it's like they had, like... And it was like they didn't really have any solid info on where specifically he was.
Like, they had to sort of divide it up between people that were like, he... probably in Korea, but also we can't just completely rule out the fact that, like, he's telling
like,
someone of the truth and he's not in Korea and he's overseas, and that makes it infinitely harder.
Because there are communities of Koreans outside in Asia in particular. I know in China they have them. They have them in
there is a diaspora. Like, there's obviously a diaspora of Koreans all over Asia, the States, Europe, all over that. So he, in theory, could have been anywhere. But the other thing was, I do think that they still believed he was in Korea just because of the way everything was going down.
And timing.
It seemed like a Korea-centric crime.
Yeah. But in terms of, how do you guys also feel still about how the documentary presented everything of this case?
I enjoyed how it was presented. I think that it very much, like all documentaries, it has its story to tell, which is, it is essentially how did they catch these people and what was that method, as opposed to as much of what they were like. They don't tend to focus on the specifics of the rooms. They focus on what is they tell you obviously what happened, but the point of the documentary is to show you what are the factors that led to them getting caught.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the only way they could have done this documentary to begin with, because I don't think it was really possible, or nor should they really have gone from the, like, view of, like, going of victims. I feel like that is not the best way to do this documentary specifically. I mean, so
it needs to be far more, like, tactful and, like, there's a specific, I think there is a way maybe not currently, I think we're still too close.
Yeah.
It's still very recent.
It's only been, like, less than 2 years since this happened.
Yeah, it's very recent. And so, like, this is very much eventually, possibly, but at this point, I think, and
plus for a lot of people, they don't want to be connected fully because they have jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, obviously. I understand not getting connected to that.
But the other thing with that is that I think that there is countless amounts of people talking about the sensationalism of this. Very little about this area of this. There were people, like, after the Nth Room, they're like, oh, so we caught these guys, this is what was going on in the rooms. You can find that information everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The specifics of how they got caught is, like, I didn't know most of this. I knew what was going, like, obviously we knew because it was something that kept getting talked about and it was a massive story.
I think
at the time,
Soompi released a
like,
couple articles on this whole situation.
It even got to the K-pop sites.
Mm-hmm.
But
which is insane.
I think that the specifics of, like, how they got caught is something that not as many people know about. So
That's
it is
true.
slightly the more interesting bit.
Yeah, and
that's,
also
like,
kind of
not
like
stuff that
how
gets really
detectives and
reported
journalists
on.
deal with cyber
No, not as
crimes.
much.
Yeah.
Especially when a crime is, like, ongoing, which for a long period of time, this was, like, an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to
Mhm.
report on specifics of how the investigation is going or anything. So, the like, stuff like Documentaries is really the only place where you get that sort of, like, more insider look at how they actually went about the investigation and ended up catching everybody.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they did only sentence both. I think they sentenced God in 2020 to prison. Oh, wait, no.
One of them got,
No,
like,
they
I think
sentenced-
40-something years. The other
yeah.
one got, like,
They
30-something years.
So they sentenced Bosca in 2020, and he got 42 years
Mm-hmm.
in prison. And then they sentenced... Yeah, God didn't get sentenced till 2021, so it is only very recently that this even finished. He got sentenced in November of 2021.
Jeez.
And he got sentenced to 34 years in prison.
Which, for Korean crimes, these are considered to be long sentences.
That's a lot.
That's a long sentence.
That's for Korea. Those are long sentences. If you've been aware of our previous talkings about, like, Burning Sun, you know that at least celebrities in particular.
Korean crimes, much like how Europeans do crime, it is more considered a they view it as more of a rehabilitation, so their sentences are far lower, as opposed to America, where, like, you know, you throw someone away forever for, you know, selling weed. What method is better? Who's to say?
But yeah, I think overall it was a good take on this. Like, the documentary was a good take on this this story in particular, focusing more on the catching the people aspect.
Yeah, it was also very, like, it did take it showed the amount of respect. Obviously, the thing with true crime documentaries is that there's always when you feel like they're sensationalizing things. And when they're, like, going a little, like, there are true crime documentaries that can make you feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And not because of what's happening, it's because of how they're talking about real people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a level of tact you have to have, and I think this really did have that.
Yes. But yeah, I think that's what we have to say for Cyber Hell.
Mm-hmm.
And then now on to the Raincoat Killer.
Raincoat Killer very
in
much
Korea.
more a typical true crime documentary
It
because it is
is.
about a serial killer.
Yes.
It's a serial killer and possible cannibal.
Possible cannibal.
One of the worst of the worst from
Cannibal.
Korea, for sure, that they caught.
Probably the most famous.
One of, if not the most famous, that was caught.
If not, like,
there's another famous murderer that was never caught. That was just
but that's
them,
like a not caught murderer.
Yeah.
But, like, in terms of, you know, how much it is probably one of the more referenced crimes is probably his, because it is very. I mean, when you have that kind of calling card, it's very easy to make references to this specific murderer.
This is also this documentary, which I find really interesting about it is really almost covering more than just the Raincoat Killer. It's almost essentially like a history of how, like, South Korea's, like, violent crimes, like, department sort of just came into existence to begin with.
Yeah,
Because
and,
this
like,
is really
evolved. And, like,
They do.
yeah.
He almost becomes like a backseat character for most of it, until maybe like the third episode when he's like, and like second episode into the third episode where he's caught and you see like images of Yoo Young Chul, who is the Raincoat Killer. Once he enters, that's when he sort of becomes a character.
Yeah.
Before that, he is almost like this background thing.
It's like an enigma almost.
It's like a ghost,
right?
Yeah. He's not a person,
like a
he's
ghost
ghoul.
almost.
Like the goal they are working toward. He is not so much a character in any capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
Because sort of they give you the background about how during this time South Korea is undergoing like pretty massive like economic growth. And just because of how South Korea as a country is changing, it also changes the types of crimes that are taking place at that time as well. So this is sort of when more violent crimes, such as things like serial killing and just like random assaults, start happening, because that's the kind of crime you see in more developed countries.
Yes.
Yeah. Because this takes place between 2003 and 2004.
Oh, at least the main crimes that we're talking about. Because he's done other crimes as well.
2003 to 2004. That is, This documentary takes place during his crimes. At least, it is a bunch of these police officers just reminiscing. But like, looking back on this crime that they were a part of and that they solved, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he killed a lot of people, and he's an
interesting
guy, because he started off with killing old rich people in their homes, and then moved on to sex workers.
And then essentially female sex workers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because essentially they caught on to the fact that he was going after old rich people, and so he's like, well, now I gotta change it up so I don't get caught.
Now I gotta move it around.
So then he went to sex workers, essentially in a different part of Seoul.
Because
he used to be killing in like a very, very wealthy area, and then moved over to just sex
Well, not
workers.
one wealthy area, multiple areas.
Multiple wealthy, very wealthy people in very wealthy areas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then completely switched it up to the opposite.
Mm-hmm. And he has stated, like, in his, like, interviews by police after he was caught, that it was like, I hate rich people, essentially, and then he was also very anti-women as well, so that's
he hates
why.
Rich people and women, and I'm like, yep.
That seems about on brand for a serial killer.
It's like, if you target rich people and you target women as your victims.
That seems like the two main motives of murder.
Yeah.
Money and the hatred of women.
Mm-hmm.
Consistently. It's great.
Yep.
Or I don't know if in case it's men that are murdered, but it's usually something else besides the fact that it's a man.
There aren't that many serial killers that only target men. That's the
There
thing.
aren't a lot.
There's a lot more serial killers that specifically target women.
Yeah.
There are, just because statistically, I mean, there are just many more male serial killers.
Overwhelmingly.
Weirdly. Yeah.
Weirdly, I have heard that the statistic is not as skewed as that, but women are they murder for different reasons, and they murder different types of people.
Yeah.
And they
but it maybe not as skewed, but like it's very much a pattern, though.
It is far more difficult to catch a woman after they kill as opposed to a man. From what I hear.
Yeah, from my understanding. But as for how this documentary played out, it's because it started off really as like a murder mystery in the beginning.
Yeah.
With like being like, why are all these wealthy people dying?
I honestly really love the aesthetic of this, because they just have them in this what almost appears like us. This isn't, because a lot of documentaries will just take people at their house or in the police station or like around something that like feels natural. They essentially bring all these cops and like these people to like a set.
Mm-hmm.
And it's honestly it's like a beautiful set.
It is.
Like it looks amazing.
Oh yeah.
And like all of the people who are interviewed here were like very much essential in both solving this case and establishing South Korea's like violent crimes department to begin with.
Yeah.
Like one of the first ever just like criminal profilers in South Korea worked on this case and then was interviewed for this documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And he provides a lot of like insight, because he's like, still even to this point, he is like criminal profiling is not like huge in South Korea, and I was really the only person at the time who you could consider like an expert in that field to begin with.
That's wild, man. It's like so much it is so many of these cops who like they talk a little bit about their own backgrounds a little bit, and their backgrounds are also absolutely fascinating. So that's why it's like, especially in the beginning, it becomes so much more their story,
right, as
opposed to the story of this horrific man.
And honestly, I really enjoyed that too, because I honestly felt, because this is like, I've seen so many true crime documentaries about serial killers at this point that honestly learning about the people who helped solve this crime and like sort of established like this entire division in like the South Korean police was like way more interesting to me than just a like your typical serial killer documentary.
I mean, what I can say, and it depends on what you're looking for in your true crime documentaries, they do not focus almost that much on the actual victims of these crimes. They are mostly also just like not background, but like they are also not a thing that they focus on too much.
Yeah, maybe out of respect for privacy, but also they probably...
also possibly out of respect for privacy, but also that is also not the story that this documentary is trying to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we also, I think, know a pretty, like, we don't actually know, they don't go into a lot of background on the actual Raincoat Killer himself that much in this documentary. Like,
Absolutely.
you know, essentially,
Very
like,
like, the most I got was that he was
him.
actually apparently a decent artist in some of his drawings, apparently. Based on what they've shown, I was like, okay, that's not terrible, I guess. I don't want to praise a killer's drawings, but...
You get very small amounts about his background and maybe sort of why he became this way anyway, but that is almost kind of stuff that they discovered after he was caught to begin with.
Yeah.
Like, you look at his life and he has just been to prison for a lot
multiple
of other
things.
stuff.
So it's kind of like...
Multiple things. And then right after he essentially gets released from prison, like, he begins killing immediately. Almost immediately.
This case is also, they use it in a lot of crime, like, K-dramas.
They
like,
do.
Season 1 of Voice, the main villain of that show is this character. Like, is heavily based off of Yoo Young Chul.
In Voice, he does kill people, essentially with, like, almost like a weight.
It's like a kettlebell. It's like
it's like a kettlebell.
Yeah, and the way Yoo Young Chul did it was with like a modified version of like a hammer, which was actually that same hammer was how they solved the case and could proved in court that he was tied to these murders because they found blood still inside the inner part of the hammer.
Yeah, because I think hammer is a little. If Voice used a hammer, it'd be a little
on the nose.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, essentially he just bashed them to death with a hammer, which is an excruciating way to die. That sounds awful.
It really does.
Because you look at like this. Also, I'm looking at the Wikipedia, and just the terms "beaten to death with a hammer" is awful. And also, eventually they just eventually it just he finds a method around his 9th killing.
Jesus.
That he then proceeds to use for the rest of them. Because post it says killed in the same procedure as the 8th crime.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, because that was when he also went after the prostitutes, and then later on it was found out he buried them all, these prostitutes, in the same location.
And what he would do is he would lure them into his bathroom, he would hit them with a hammer, and then he would have to dismember their bodies, put them in a trash bag, and then he would put kimchi in the trash bags in order to disguise like the smell of it, and then he would go dump them in like a forest by a shrine.
And also decapitated them.
The messed up thing with his last half of these crimes is that he did these all almost on a weekly basis, like from June to July.
Upsettingly common,
which is
post
God.
June of 2004. You get June 1st, June 9th, June 18th, June 25th, July 2nd, July 9th, July 13th, last murder July 15th. That is that.
No. It wasn't. He didn't murder on July 15th. That was when he was captured.
That was when he was captured. Sorry. But everything else is basically one a week from June down. Before that, he's averaging about one a month. Post then, it's about one a week.
Which is like, what the actual hell?
For a total of 16 confirmed murders.
And there may or may not have been more.
Possibly more. Who's to say? 16 confirmed murders.
Yeah. He's also got one really random murder that is not in line with the other thing, where he killed like a random food stall person.
In a van, and set the van on fire.
So it's a van. Yeah, so it was a vendor who apparently gave him fake Viagra, then murdered him by sawing his hands off, and then set the van on fire.
Yep.
That's horrifying.
Terrible.
It's like, what the actual hell?
Yeah, it's a very that one seems more like a crime of passion.
And I think it was also a thing where it's like he apparently saw his face for too long, so he didn't want him to be able to like point him out to anyone else. So I think it was more of like a spur of the moment one than it was any of his like more procedurally planned out ones that he's done. Yeah.
No. I mean, all of these are just absolutely horrifying. Like, he also did have a bunch of arson here, because he not only burns this van, but he burned down the house of his fourth victim to destroy evidence. But he doesn't go back to that often. It's just, like, incredibly, like, horrifying ways of, like, true torture. It wasn't just killing, it was just torture and killing.
There are so many things that happen in this documentary that are wild to think that they happened because they were so early in South Korea's, like, development of this thing. Like, the fact, so the reason he's called the Raincoat Killer is because
nothing to do with his actual murder.
Nothing has to do with rain.
I was so confused as to why he was called that for a very long time. It's because they put him in a yellow rain jacket when they asked him to take the police to where the bodies were buried. And this whole scene that happens when he's just like he's got
not
two
even really
police.
Wearing the raincoat.
No.
He is essentially hood on head. And then essentially the arms
it's
are
tied
around
his
him.
body because he's in handcuffs.
His hands are not. Yeah, he's handcuffed in front. The arms are tied in front.
He's wearing a face mask too.
So it's essentially and he's wearing a face mask. I think that's because like
they don't want him. They don't want him to see their face.
Yeah, they don't identify people in that way.
Yeah,
he's also wearing like a baseball hat underneath. Like it's like you can barely see this.
And
man.
it's crazy to me that there's just like a media circus happening just around this serial killer that they're parading up to a forest. That I'm like, this seems like. There are so many things could go
like where
wrong
they're digging where they're excavating for bodies, like
and
they're about to find essentially a mass grave.
Yeah,
like a full mass.
The wildest thing about this situation, though,
a mass grave.
I have to bring up.
But also, it is new.
Yeah,
it is just no one knew what was.
No one knew what to do or what was happening.
What to do? Like it's really like
so I get why that was happening, why it happened, but I'm like this also, feels like so many things could go wrong.
I also am not sure that they expected mass graves.
And then there was like two other weird, kind of crazy things that happened in this case. One was the fact that you escaped police custody.
He escaped.
He did.
And was rearrested 12 hours later.
He faked a seizure.
Yeah.
And then escaped. And then they found him pretty shortly after, but he did escape.
He didn't escape for long.
Yeah.
He just sort of escaped for a little bit.
And then the other thing was that you didn't do himself, but they were taking him out of the prosecution office with media, and then literally, allegedly, a mother
allegedly.
Allegedly. No, I'm not saying allegedly. I'm just saying allegedly the person was a mother of a victim.
Oh, okay.
Is that she ran up with an umbrella about to attack you because fair, but a police officer literally kicked her down the stairs. Straight up, kicked her down the stairs.
Kicked an old
I thought you were saying he
allegedly.
Marie, I thought you were saying he allegedly kicked her, and I'm like, we have video evidence.
That was broadcast live.
No, I'm saying allegedly the person who was trying to attack them was a victim's mom.
Yes.
That was broadcast.
Like, allegedly.
It was broadcast live on South Korean television. This police officer kicking an old woman in the chest down the stairs.
And apparently the repercussion of this was that they basically missed on a big bonus salary from the police.
And also he didn't get it. He also just did not get his. He was set for a promotion that he just never received.
Yeah, or like the head guy.
Honestly,
I think it was the head guy. Yeah.
And it's so wild because this one incident just completely ruined all of the media coverage around it. Was like, yeah, they just caught the serial killer, but this one police kicked an old woman down the stairs.
Because
it's
like what the fuck?
Because also why would you do that?
But also what the fuck is your first instinct is to kick a woman down the stairs? But that was like reaction one.
Yeah.
He didn't let go of him and then try to grab.
Reaction one, kick down the stairs.
Because he's not the only person holding this guy. There are multiple police officers. If he just stopped holding on to the serial killer and was like, okay, lady, let's go. And then maybe, it escalates. No, reaction 1, kick lady downstairs.
Okay, well, look at this further, and then apparently it was the mother of the Inmoon Dawn murder victim, which I'm not quite sure which one that was, but anyway, so that's who it allegedly was, who ran with the umbrella. Which, I mean, fair, honestly. It's like, the more I hear about these true crime situations, when I hear, you hear people in the courtroom going after murderers, it's like, honestly, fair. Even if you do get in trouble for it, fair. I don't blame you for trying to beat the shit out of them.
The mother was there because the police took so long to catch him. They were like, if you figured this out like a week earlier, my daughter would still be alive.
I think she's the last one.
Yeah.
I see.
Imi Yoon is the 27-year-old and sets the 16th victim. He kills her on the 13th. He's caught the 15th. So I can understand being angry.
Gotcha. Okay, so I see. Yeah.
I think she is that
I mean, granted, if they did get their act together too, because this started back in the end of September of 2003. So like there was a lot there that they could have stopped him potentially.
Again, to give benefit of the doubt, the fact of the matter of changing your victim pool so abruptly into the exact opposite thing is also a lot of like, it throws people off. Also, there was no violent crime division in South Korea up until this point.
That's true.
Like, there's a lot of factors going into this.
And I remember
still horrifying that there are 16 people dead.
I remember them going into this too. I will say one thing I did like about the documentary. I thought how they showed the locations of where I like the design of like Seoul and the locations they showed.
Oh yeah,
I like which sounds weird to say, but I like the aesthetic of that. I liked how they showed that.
I also love the amount of the time news footage and like actual footage
and CCTV. They use CCTV of him that they caught.
Still there. But even just like news footage of like people from 2004 talking, and it's just like I like setting that because 2004 wasn't that long ago, but also it was a very long, like with how much has changed. It was a very long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's been almost 20 years, but also like, you know.
Because I know one of the most interesting things is when they had this like mass grave of people that they had found.
Yeah.
They would say it's going to take a really long time to send in these samples for DNA analysis. So one of the detectives working on the scene worked really hard to get fingerprints off of them instead.
I remember
so
that.
they were able to identify all of them that night instead of having to wait however many weeks it would have taken for that.
Honestly, that woman, that's a great detective. That was a great detective.
I wish I had her name. I don't have her name.
I forget her name too, honestly, but like,
because the other thing with her that she was one of the only, I mean, it was
one of the only women working
one of the only
there.
Women involved
that too
in
as
this
well.
whole operation.
A big deal.
And like she was phenomenal. I loved her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she understood the severity. She understood the need to get this done, and she did what she had to do.
I will give this. I think everybody understood the severity of like we need to like catch this guy. What he's doing is horrific, but like she was very, very good.
Yes.
Okay, so I went back to the documentary. That man with the sunglasses is not the person who kicked her down.
I knew it was someone different.
He was just in charge. So
it was someone underneath him. I knew it.
In charge?
I knew it.
Yeah. They didn't clear that up, but honestly, it was like
that was like one of the people he was overseeing who was younger, and he's like, why did you do
that?
This? And then of course
why did you just
got in trouble?
And then he got demoted because of that. Yeah.
Because he was in charge of the guy, which is like okay,
You know what? Fair enough. Maybe just, be clear with your staff. Don't assault
the victim's family. There are two other interesting things about this case I wanted to talk about. One is that they attempted to get him to confess to a crime he didn't commit as well.
That's fair.
When he was in custody, which is like I think it was a similar type of murder. I think it was I can't remember if it was an old people in a rich neighborhood murder or if it was like another sex worker murder, but it was in a different part of the city. And they tried to get him to confess to that as well because it would have made things significantly easier for the police department.
Yeah.
And that also was another thing where there was clearly a lot of corruption going on in the police department at the time because they also said that they had a lot of contacts within like the with like the brothels and the sex work industry as well, which like a lot of the officers would take bribes and stuff from that.
And actually, on top of that, Kayla, they talked about the methods they tried to catch him with using sex workers, like undercover cops straight up using sex workers, which I'm pretty sure they had no idea what they were doing to catch this guy.
Nope.
No, they were really trying everything possible.
They were just throwing essentially everything at the wall and being like, maybe something will work.
So let's throw the entire kitchen sink at this dude.
I mean, honestly, when you don't have a method, when it's like the first one, when it's like the first killer of this kind of nature, you have, like, obviously you're gonna be like throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it to see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. The other thing was that they do talk to, I remember one of the family members of the victims, this was it was like the brother of this random street vendor he ended up killing.
Yeah.
And they did have a little note in there about how, they sort of created a whole foundation for like family support of like these victims of these type of crimes, because
that's right.
I remember I almost cried because he had this story about how he was so upset and then went up to a mountain and was gonna commit suicide essentially, but then he found a stray dog up there, and that like made him sad that someone abandoned the dog up there, so then he took the dog home with him. And, like, taking care of the dog made him, like, want to live his life again. And it was, like, super sad, but also very cute. And then at the end, they had this whole thing is, like, how South Korea had established this entire foundation now that is specifically for the support of victims' families. And they were helping him through a whole bunch of stuff because both of his other two brothers, they had said, had committed suicide after their other brother had been, like, murdered. So... they sort of went into depth about how they're like that was also a thing they had to establish because it was not a thing that they had to think about before.
Yeah. So I want to go back to so this man gets arrested, sort of admits to everything quite quickly, and then admits to more. Yeah. Because he also we mentioned possible cannibal at the beginning of this episode.
Yes, we did.
No one is able to prove that he was a cannibal. No one knows at all, but he says he was. He tells the police, I ate some of these people. And
I think he said he ate the liver of someone specifically. Which is like, okay.
Okay, but they are at no point able to prove that happened because they're like, I don't know.
And by that point, the liver is just...
How would you prove that happened, other than him just telling you?
Other than him telling you, and they just are not able to prove, because the bodies that they find are, like, fully intact. It does not, like... But the ones that he claims to have eaten is already so decomposed of, like, who knows if she still had a liver? Who's to say? But... Why would you... What?
I
feel like he's not a cannibal. I'm gonna go out on a limb and think he's doing this for, like, extra
extra flourish, I guess.
Extra flourish at the end.
I really don't know. I don't think I want to question, honestly, with people like that.
To being a cannibal.
At this point, it's like you're already a messed up person. Just going around murder people for no good reason.
Well, there are a bunch of serial killers that admit to murders that they can't have committed.
Yeah.
Killers do weird shit.
I feel like they just do this so that sound bites get to a prison, so then it's like they already have a reputation before they go into a prison. Half the time, that's what I think.
I mean, this man already killed 16 people. Who knows if he needs more?
Does he?
He killed 16 people.
The only thing I do find interesting is that he was sentenced to death, but apparently
he has not been
no death has been carried out since 1997 in Korea.
Exactly. He was sentenced to death on December 13th of 2004. He is currently in like death row, essentially the Korean equivalent of death row, but I believe that there have been no executions in Korea since like 1991 or something.
Oh, I just looked up into more of this.
1995.
The Inmundan murder was the one that they tried to pit on him that wasn't successful. That was the one that was the one the mom charging at him and blah 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 blah.
Okay,
so that one they weren't able to pit on him.
Yeah,
that kind of was
the one that he maybe did or didn't do.
Yes,
and then, but it's not one of the 16 confirmed, and like I think there's like one or two that they tried to pin and didn't work out.
Yeah, I mean, he got 20 counts of murder.
Which
is what he got total.
Far too many.
Way too many.
So many.
I mean, just a general murder count in general.
I believe the last actual execution. Yeah. So essentially, I'm looking at the Korean death row right now.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the last one was 1995. Was the last execution that I'm able to find.
Yeah, it's interesting because what I'm looking at saying it has not been carried out since 97, which is interesting.
Possibly, which I might.
Yeah.
Which I'm probably just.
So there's a little bit of discrepancy there, I guess, but
yeah,
before the new millennium, there hasn't been one before the new millennium.
Yeah, nothing since 2000.
Yeah. So he's just sitting there in Seoul Detention Center, hopefully rotting away. Is my hope. Hopefully rotting away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hopefully. I mean, he's been in there since 2004. So that was the Raincoat Killer. Mm-hmm. Are there any other Korean crimes that we want to have documentaries about?
I have one.
Kind of two. We have the same one.
We do
let's
have the
be
same
honest.
one. It is the same one,
which is wild,
which
is our like little, it's our little like not our there's a weird thing to say favorite crime, but it's our like little thing of like there needs to be more information about this specific crime that I'm fascinated by.
On it. Yeah, because it is truly fascinating.
Wild. It's insane.
It's about the Chijeon gang in South Korea. So they are a cannibal cult, essentially. And it is absolutely just wild.
A wild story.
A wild story of also what they do and also how they got caught is almost wilder.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
It's absolutely wild.
It's incredible. It's an incredible, like, there are some YouTube videos about it. You can find them, but like, I need like a full Raincoat Killer style documentary. I want to know like what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
For the gang,
the gang was also like incredibly young. Like the leader was like 27 and everyone else is like 23
like
to like
23, 20, 21, 22. Like they're super early young. 20s. And they're out here trying to get money and also eat some people.
Jeez. Yep. The one that I want to see especially has to be probably the most infamous one, the Hwasun serial murders and Lee Chun-jae, because this guy, he was proven to have done them, but because this was in 2019, it was after the statute of limitations had expired, so he couldn't be prosecuted for them. And these murders happened between 1986 and 1994. He killed about 15 women and young girls.
Oh geez.
This is one that I want to see document on, because the fact that this guy was allowed to get away is insane.
Yeah.
It's insane.
I mean, there's also a few other Korean serial killers, this kind of thing. I would be curious of a documentary about, speaking of around the same time period, the South Korean president that got sentenced in prison. That would be an interesting documentary.
Which one? The first woman one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that one we kind of...
Because then there's also the guy who also went to jail.
And also her father, I think, would be an interesting one to talk about, too, because he was part of the dictatorship that was going on up until the end of the 80s, so...
Yeah. There's a bunch of documentaries. I really just want that Cannibal Gang documentary, man.
I really do. It's insane.
Marie, you don't know.
Insane.
Like, there's more to this. Like, there's a woman that takes them down essentially on her own.
Oh god.
Oh, she's great. I love her.
It's like they kidnap her and her boyfriend. They kill the boyfriend, but they keep her hostage.
They keep her alive, and she then gains their trust, and then also
runs away with their money.
Then runs away and then runs to the cops.
That is chaotic. That is absolutely chaotic.
And they think she's insane because
they think she's insane at first, because it's like, what the hell's going on here? And then she takes them down essentially, and then they believe her, and then this cannibal game all gets sentenced to death, and they all do end up, the ones that do get have a death sentence, I believe it's only... Oh no, it's all of them except for one of the girlfriends.
Oh wow.
Get sentenced to death. Mm-hmm. And then all of them do get executed. Like, they are one of they're one of that last executions in South Korea. It is an
absolutely
wild, the Hwasun serial murders, I guess the impact of that, because that was one of the first major serial killers to come about, and that inspired actually Bong Joon-ho's Memories of Murder. That was like his kickoff crime thriller film.
That one is also heavily referenced in the K-drama Signal as well. That's like the main case they sort of base.
No one talks about the cannibal cult. You know the only reason we know about the cannibal cult, and I will remember exactly when we learned. It is because we were looking up. We were watching Criminal Minds Korea. And we were like, does Korea have capital punishment? Because we weren't sure. Because they had capital punishment, but that's also because it's taking stories directly from
it's getting
the American show. So we're like,
we weren't sure.
Do they actually have capital punishment in South Korea? And we looked it up, and yes, they do. And then we learned about, and then we found the word cannibal cult. Like Cannibal Gang, and I'm like, what the fuck is this?
You need to send me this information because I think I have to dissect this.
It's wild.
It's absolutely wild.
God.
It's wild. It is our little
known serial killer cannibalism.
It's our little niche of serial. Everyone's got that one more unknown case that they like or that they find interesting in true crime. Ours is the cannibal cult.
Yep.
They're not a cult, they're a gang.
They're kind of a cult, a little bit. They have like a doctrine and everything.
They do have a mantra, which is, they have a doctrine, which is, we hate those with plenty of money, a traitor in the group must be killed, and don't trust women, not even your mother. Which, again, I think falls in line with the Raincoat Killer.
It's hitting all of the facets of serial killers.
Jesus.
It's hitting really all the facets of both of the other crimes we were talking about.
Yep.
All right, so on the Hwasun serial murders, the guy actually did get convicted for killing his sister-in-law, an 18-year-old. So like he was sentenced to death for rape and murder of her, but had reduced to life imprisonment by the Supreme Court, and then never got convicted for the prior murders he had done.
Dang.
That's what happened. So like he did get caught, but like he never got served time for everyone else that he killed, basically.
Yeah. So I've also kept reading. Apparently, the only reason that this cannibal group got caught is because after this woman, like, runs away and goes to the cops and is like, I've been kidnapped by a, murderous cannibal group, they're like, she starts talking about a murder that has not been released to the public, and they're like, well, now we have to believe you.
Wild.
Yeah, please send me that information. I need to look up on that, because that is absolutely
it is wild.
Oh.
Goodness.
That needs to be, that would be a documentary.
I need that to be the next one. I really need a documentary.
I mean, it has to be that one or the Haesan ones, because those are like the two big.
Honestly, you get some interesting, it's wild.
God.
You get some wild crimes in Asia has some wild crimes. Like, they don't have as much crime as America, but the crime they have.
Why don't they have as much crime? There probably is a lot more petty crimes and stuff that happen more than we know.
But I'm talking like murder. Like, per capita murder is far lower. Even per capita theft is far lower. Like, there might be petty crime about on average per capita, but like big crime like murder and all of that is far lower. But when it happens,
plus you also got to factor in the triads in China and then like the Yakuza in Japan. There's probably a lot of not mentioned crime.
A lot of stuff happening there.
There's a lot of
but
stuff
we're never going to know about that.
No.
We don't. I don't think I want to know.
Me either. I'd rather not get involved.
Yeah, I don't want to. That's a thing I don't want to know. I don't want to look into that.
I don't want to know. I'm good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm good with avoiding those guys.
Yep.
So that was our.
That's been the true crime episode, everybody. We may return to this in the future. We may not return to this in the future.
If they do the documentaries on these true crime cases we want,
or just any other interesting documentary from Korea that involves crime.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll even take if they do interesting. I'll even do enough K-pop adjacent. If they do interesting true crime documentaries about either some sort of East to Southeast Asian crime, possible.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see. To be determined.
To be determined at a later date.
Yep. So we are available on all major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and we also have a YouTube channel where we post all of our episodes along with fun clip videos as well. And with that, we will see you in the next episode. Bye!
Bye!
Bye!